Let us begin with what has been happening since the violence broke out a week ago. At least 779 people have been arrested so far in connection with the riots in towns and cities across the UK, and at least 349 have been charged for a variety of offences. The top prosecutor in England and Wales has warned that hundreds more will be hauled before the courts in the coming days, with longer sentences for the most serious offenders. Stephen Parkinson, Director of Public Prosecutions, told the Sunday Times that in a new phase of cases, more suspects could be charged with rioting, which carries a maximum sentence of 10 years. It's not about exacting revenge, he said. It's about delivering justice. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary and Conservative Party leadership candidate James Cleverly told Times Radio he backed tough sentences for serious offences. Well, let me start with you. Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, you've been in Parliament a good long time. What do you make of the way the new Labour government has responded to this violence?
Well, of course, we had similar riots in 2011 under David Cameron, and he did then what Keir Starmer is doing now, which is to deploy the full force of police force, of charging, and of sentencing of any people who have committed crimes during these riots. And that's the right thing to do. The problem with all of this is that it's only covering up the symptoms. It's not dealing with the underlying causes. And that is that until you can assimilate all the people who are coming into this country, you are going to have tensions. And we can only assimilate so many at one time. And until you deal with the immigration problem, and I don't see any signs that this Labour government are doing that, this will simmer under the surface and occasionally boil over, as it has done in the last 10 days or so.
Emily Darlington, do you think that Sir Geoffrey's right there? You may have dealt with those that are directly responsible for some of the trouble, but you're not dealing with the underlying cause, which is this concern about immigration.
So I think that, certainly locally, and we've seen tensions rise locally. We do a lot of work in Milton Keynes, but this is the first time the meeting that I had with the mosques and various other people from the BME community, they felt they actually had a government that was coming in to calm things down rather than ramp up rhetoric. Sure, people are using the context of immigration, and we do have a 5-point plan to actually get immigration under control. But the reality is the people that are being targeted are people from Bangladeshi descent, but they may have been here 3 generations. They are British. And it's the rioters that aren't upholding the British values, our values of rule of law and tolerance and individuality. These are things that we're known for around the world, and actually that damage to our reputation around the world because the rioters don't demonstrate those British values. We need to get back to that. And sure, we have some work to do, but it's not just about immigration. It's about respecting our diversity and understanding if you've moved here 3 generations ago and you've built a business and you're integrated into the community, actually, why is that being weaponized by these rioters, by particular politicians, by other people? That's just to create divisions and to say it's about this issue, but actually it's about something much, much wider, which is, are we an internationalist, forward-looking, outward-looking country, or are we trying to hark back to a day in Britain that actually never existed?
Sean Berry, let me ask you about that. Do you think that Sir Geoffrey has a point in saying that, yes, most people would agree that it's right to lock up those who are responsible for the worst violence, but that is not tackling the underlying causes?
I think I take a different view to Geoffrey on this. I think perhaps he's slightly not listening to what was said by the vast majority of people, and opinion polls show this as well, out on the streets of Britain this week, which was that we are a nation who will not have this level of violent racism exhibiting itself in public on our streets. And most people in this country, like I think Emily was saying, are very welcoming of migrants of all kinds, of people who've been here for generations. We want to live together with our Muslim brothers and sisters who are primarily the targets of this, but we're also proud of being a multicultural nation. Now, the King himself spoke up about this week. He didn't only say thank you to the police, thank you to the courts for dealing with this. And I think that has been a large part of the deterrent effect that's happened. He also thanked the people of Britain for standing up for the values of Britain, which are those of being together, of respecting and wanting to be part of society with your neighbour, no matter where they're from or their age or their race or any of those other different things. People want to build a better society, and that's what came out this week. And I don't think that Geoffrey's right to say that there is simmering racism underneath the surface of the majority of people. And the majority of people found a voice this week, and I hope that carries on. I hope we don't start talking again about how to cut immigration, because most people want to welcome migrants to this country.
Well, I will come back to Sir Geoffrey in a moment, but Rachel, I think it has been noticeable, hasn't it, that since the first phase of the riots last weekend, riots in so many of our towns and cities, in Newcastle, in Southport, of course, we saw in Liverpool, and other places too, Middlesbrough. We did see this weekend quite significant numbers of anti-racist protesters out on the streets. Do you think it's too early to say that a corner has been turned?
I think two things have really taken the momentum out of the violence that we've seen. I mean, three if you possibly count the weather, although now it's got very hot again. That could be a factor as well, because we know that hot, dry summer evenings are a factor in all this. But the two things that I think have taken the heat out of it, one were the counter demonstrations that we saw, particularly on Wednesday and then at the weekend, when all of these places where there were reports, there was intelligence, there were going to be far-right rallies or protests, thousands and thousands of anti-racism, anti-fascism counter-protesters turned up. And the scenes that we saw, thousands of people in the street saying, this is not what our community is about, I think that will have had an impact, particularly for people who think, possibly because of what they've seen on social media, that they speak for the majority or they speak for the average Brit. And we saw very much that those counter-protesters show that is not the case. The other thing that's very much taken the heat out of it has been the speed at which the justice system has kicked into gear, not just the arrests, but processing, charging, and indeed sentencing people very, very visibly. We've seen lots of court reports, photographs of people being sentenced, with the evidence against them sometimes being things that they posted on their own social media feeds, videos that they took themselves. So once the consequences of the violence became very apparent and became a sort of national story, I think that's had a very large deterrent effect as well. As for whether we've turned a corner, there are immediate term causes of this and there are longer term causes of it. And the poll that I think is possibly the one that Sean Berry was referring to there, that showed that a vast majority, 85% of British people condemn the violence, don't support it at all. And that's really heartening in a way. The issue is the 15% that either aren't sure or that do support it. And that speaks to a minority, but a significant enough minority, 12 to 15%, who feel so alienated and so frustrated that they genuinely do think that the violence is justified. Obviously it isn't, but I think the government and all the political parties actually are going to have to recognise that that is a significant number who feel that something has gone very badly wrong.
And I think I'm right in saying that poll also showed that almost 50% believed that immigration was too high. I did just want to give Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown a chance to respond, because, I mean, do you think that there is a risk in immediately saying, look, there are root causes, it's about immigration is too high, that by making those comments that you risk legitimizing some of those who have gone out and caused trouble, and indeed helping to exacerbate some of the divisions which there are in some communities?
Well, I want to make it quite clear, Carol, that I don't in any way condone disorder. And we are a welcoming country. We've always welcomed, ever since the Huguenots, way back. people from other countries, and particularly people who are in dire circumstances. But I think it is the rate of immigration that we've seen over the last few years that is the fear in this country at the moment amongst some people. And that is why I think we do need a tough immigration problem. We cannot be welcoming everybody from around the world just as economic migrants. That's a very different thing from a refugee. We just simply can't do it because our public services can't cope. And I think it is that feeling amongst people that our public services are being put under huge pressure, whether it's schools, housing, NHS, or whatever. And I think and I don't in any way condone it, let me get this absolutely clear, but I think it was a fear amongst some of those who who misbehaved, that the rate at the moment is too high, and they're looking for their government to get it under control.
Sian Berry's been longing to come in. A quick word from you, Sian.
I mean, we do need to remember that one of the causes of this, one of the proximate causes, was lies on the internet. And
we're going to talk a bit more in detail about social media. We must talk about that.
But if you think that we've had too many people coming in to work in our NHS when our NHS desperately needs people to work, and if you are saying that asylum seekers, people who need to claim asylum from conflicts around the world, shouldn't be coming in boats, then give them a legal way to get here, because that's the reason we have the horrible scenes. And we've seen 2 people die today in the Channel, horrible scenes of people getting here through the use of criminal gangs in illegal little boats because they're not given a legal way to claim asylum. And we are a country that is known for giving people asylum in times of war, and we need to maintain and restore that reputation, which is so tarnished by his own government.
I am going to come back to that whole wider question about social media, but as you mentioned, we have had 2 people who've died trying to cross the Channel in a dinghy. Today, it brings the death toll since mid-July to at least 9, and we're also hearing that about 50 people were rescued with a helicopter and several ships sent to the scene, but 2 people declared dead. I mean, when you hear of instances like that, Emily, it does it not underline the need to try to get to grips with this problem? And of course, the Labour government has scrapped the previous government's plan to send some migrants to Rwanda, which they believed would have acted as a deterrent.
I think when you are that desperate, nothing is a deterrent. Let's be honest, the Rwanda scheme, with the amount of money that it cost, and it sent 4 volunteers over. I mean, it was a gimmick. And this is where we have to get serious about immigration and our international responsibilities when it comes to refugees. When people are dying in our Channel, where we have to be both within international law and with a degree of compassion and understanding, rather than othering them, rather than making them the scapegoat for 14 years of cuts that we've seen in health service and schools and all that stuff. I think Jeffrey's right. I think people are concerned about that, but it wouldn't be in the state that it was if we hadn't had those 14 years of austerity. And it's not their fault. It is not the asylum seekers' fault, and nor is it the immigrants' fault. Sian makes a really important point. Without immigrants, where would our NHS be? And even more importantly, where would our social care be? People that are actually coming to our country to actually help take care of our elderly and most vulnerable. So yes, let's have a discussion about all of this. Absolutely crack down on the illegal, on the people that are coming, that are helping the people to come across in the boats, because they are absolutely making a mint off of people's fear and vulnerabilities. But let's not demonize those individuals are doing it and blame them for the problems in this country.